Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 64, Gonzaga versus Cro Cop 2. Honestly, I couldn't give two craps about this card. There's nothing relevant here at all. Not one matchup. The only fighters on here I think are really worth watching who still, have some upside and potential. Jimmy Manuwa and Joanne Calderwood. But even those matchups, they're taking on, Calderwood's taking on a debuting fighter, and Manuwa, even if he gets the win here over Blachowicz, I'm not sure that means a whole lot. But first Fight Pass card in a while, and it's more filler than ever. Tons of fighters here making their debuts, so there's only going to be a handful of fights here that I'm going to make predictions for. I just don't know any of these guys, but let's get right to it, and hopefully it'll be a pretty quick video, but it's not going to be too much excitement or in-depth analysis for this card. Starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card at featherweight, Taylor Lapilus versus Rocky Lee. We're going to have to skip over it. Don't know these guys. Taylor Lapilus, I think he was supposed to take on Dennis Seaver back in the Stockholm card in October. And I think the week of the fight, the commission put a stop to that because Lapilus, I think it was coming from MMA in France where they don't allow elbows on the ground. And I think they deemed him an unfit opponent for a guy of Seaver's level. And I thought that was hilarious. But anyways, Lapilus versus Rocky Lee. Moving on. Lightweight, Marcin Bandel versus Stephen Ray. Bandel, coming off of his debut loss to Marbek Taisumov, really got ran through, and that's not really a knock on him. Taisumov looks like a really dangerous striker. Hasn't really beaten anyone any good yet, but still looks like a promising talent. But really, didn't put up a fight at all, just got steamrolled in the first round. But again, one newcomer here, Stephen Ray, and Marcin Bandel can't make a pick, so moving on. Women's strawweight, Isabella Baduric versus Alexandra Albu. Again, two newcomers, don't know them, can't make a pick here. I do appreciate, though, that they're adding new fighters to the women's 115-pound division. That's always good, but don't know anything about these ladies. So moving on, heavyweight fight, Daniel Omielanczuk versus Anthony Hamilton. Omielanczuk won his UFC debut against Nandor Guillermino. Was getting worked over on the ground kind of badly early in that fight. Was stuck in Guillermino's mount. I think it was in the second round, though, was able to get back to his feet, and was in the third round, actually, got back to his feet and just cracked him with a big shot, knocked him out. And then his next fight against Jared Rosholt, again, really struggled on the ground, couldn't do anything to defend the takedowns, couldn't create any space on the feet, had no time to work there, and Rosholt just out-wrestled him for a decision. Anthony Hamilton in his debut fight took on Alexei Olenek, who I think looks like one of the more legit additions to heavyweight. This past year we've gotten a lot of kind of new heavyweights, and they all seem kind of novel, just fighting amongst themselves amongst the lower ranks. But I think Olenek looks like a pretty good talent. But Hamilton lost, by neck crank to him in the first round. Just got dragged down and neck cranked. So kind of a bad way to lose, I thought. And then his next fight against Ruin Potts was able to get the stoppage, but might have been one of the most unimpressive finishes I've ever seen. Just dragged the guy down, got on top, and must have landed about 50 or so shots to the body before the ref stopped the fight. And I mean, it was a legitimate stoppage. He hurt him with those body shots, but he couldn't posture up and do any more violent ground and pound. I just think he looks like a low-level fighter. Not great athletically, and that's really heavyweight for you these days, especially the lower ranks, and then got knocked out pretty easily by Todd Duffy in his last fight. I'm gonna go with Anthony Hamilton here, though. He showed some a little bit of a ground game against Potts, and Omielanczuk really struggling with Guillermino and Roshold on the ground. I think Hamilton's going to be able to impose that size. Omielanczuk's kind of small too, I think, for the weight class. Maybe not. He's 6'1", but Hamilton, I believe, is Hamilton's 6'5", so he's going to have a big size advantage. And Omielanczuk, I just think, is kind of too slow on the feet and kind of too out of shape to really get any significant time on the feet to work. So I have to go with Hamilton here. I think he grapples his way to a decision. Next up at featherweight, Damian Stasiak versus Yatsin Meza. Stasiak, another debuting fighter, and Yatsin Meza has only won one fight in the UFC. That was against John Albert, kind of a washout from Tough, and he's been long gone from the UFC, but has lost his three other fights. Took on Chad Mendes short notice in his debut, got knocked out quickly, and then lost decisions to Pettis and Chico Camus, which weren't competitive at all, and Camus, being the smaller fighter, badly out-grappled Meza. So I think Meza's just a really bottom-of-the-barrel level fighter in the UFC. I would definitely not expect him to win just based on his couple of UFC fights. But again, Stasiak, new fighter, so can't make a pick. Next up at welterweight, the return of Sergio Moraes versus Michael Liebout. Mikael Moraes, I really liked his win over Neil Magny. That was about a year and a half ago, if not longer. But he had a really great submission win there. Really decorated jiu-jitsu guy, and seems like his jiu-jitsu translates extremely well to MMA. Probably one of the most successful MMA fighters with the jiu-jitsu background. He just took Magny down, locked up the triangle, and then hooked the leg, rolled him over to mount to finish it off. And it was great. Before that, he had another submission win over a fellow Tough castmate, I think Henne Forch, and fought in the finale against Cesar Ferreira. He stepped in for the guy who beat him on the show, Daniel Sarafian. I think he lost to him by flying knee knockout in the house, but then filled in for him. Injury replacement, fought Cesar Ferreira, and went to a decision. Didn't look great in that fight. His hands, we definitely haven't seen much of them in the UFC, but his jiu-jitsu seems like it's very deadly and effective. So I'm excited to see him again, and I would expect him to be impressive here. But again, Mikael Liebout, newcomer, and don't know him, so can't make a prediction here. Moving on to middleweight, Bartosz Fabinski versus Gareth McLellan. Again, two newcomers. Next up, last fight on the preliminary card at welterweight, Seth Baczynski versus Leon Edwards. I think this is a sleeper fight here. Decent matchup. Leon Edwards debuted in his debut fight. His last fight took on Claudio Enrique de Silva, and I thought he looked really good in the first round. Really opened up with his striking. He's a British fighter and has long, rangy striking. Was mixing up punches and kicks really well. Looked really smooth and technical. Good speed and accuracy with his strikes. And then I think I can't remember if I scored the fight for him. I thought he definitely looked more impressive than Silva, but I think he lost those last two rounds, spending too much time on his back. But Seth Baczynski, tough 11 veteran, and had some promise early in his UFC career. Had the knockout of Simeon Thorsen, where he was getting lit up early and just kind of found the knockout out of nowhere. Had some other decent wins, but his last couple of fights, he just it really seems to have fallen apart for him. Got knocked out twice in the last couple of years by Brian Melanson. Knocked out in his last fight against Alan Jouban. Hurt Jouban early, but Jouban was able to recover and then knocked him out. I thought before that his fight against Thiago Alves, he was able to make it competitive. But Alves was returning from such a long layoff, and just he's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Has a win over Neil Magny in there. That was before Magny went on his big streak, and I can't take him to win this fight. He does some things well. He's a big guy. He was strong in the clinch against Magny, took him down a few times. His striking is not technical at all, but he's shown power against Simeon Thorson. That has some submission skills as well. Way back 2011 had a submission win over Matt Brown, so has skills definitely. But I think Leon Edwards is just looked like a far more smooth technical striker, and more speed, and with the range striking, I think is really going to stifle Baczynski. I think kind of a similar matchup to Jouban, and he'll have some of those similar advantages. So I have to go with Leon Edwards here. All right, on to the main card. Women's strawweight fight, Joanne Calderwood versus Marina Marash, maybe. Joanne Calderwood in the house, tough 20. Beat Emily Kagan in her first fight, lost to Rose Namajunas. And then in the finale, fought Seo-Hee Ham. And I thought she looked really good, looked really strong in the clinch, great elbows and knees from that position. Did a great job of turning Ham when she had her back against the fence, reversing the clinch position. And I think she's a serious talent. I don't know if she can be champion, but looks talented and looks strong for the weight class. And Marina, debuting fighter, don't know anything about her, so I'm not gonna make a pick. But Calderwood, I do think is a good fighter, and someone to keep an eye on. Next up at welterweight, Pawlak versus Sheldon Westcott. Sheldon Westcott from Tough Nations. Pawlak, he lost to Patrick Cote. About a year ago, and that fight wasn't competitive. It was very uneventful. Really, to me, just didn't do much of anything and looked like a subpar UFC fighter. I think he fought Peter Sabata. No, I don't know. Never mind. I think I'm mistaken on that. I don't know if he was in the UFC before, like several years ago, and got cut. I'm not sure. I think I'm thinking of someone else, but just didn't do anything in the Cote fight that really looked good at all. Just very unimpressive. Sheldon Westcott from Tough Nations, finalist, lost to Theodoro, got finished. Couldn't deal with Theodoro's pace and aggression. But I think got a submission win in the house, and I didn't watch much of that season. I don't know. I don't remember who he submitted, but I do think he has he's a wrestler, and that's where he likes to take the fight to the ground. And I think he's going to beat Pawlak here. I mean, Pawlak just again didn't do anything semi-impressive, and with the wrestling, I don't think. I just don't imagine Pawlak having the skills to deal with that. So I think Westcott's going to win here. Next up, a light heavyweight, Jimmy Manuwa versus Jan Blachowicz. Jimmy Manuwa, a guy who looks like he has a lot of promise and talent. Looks like he has a lot of pure athleticism and looks smooth on the feet, but just hasn't had that signature performance yet. Even the guys he's beaten several of those fights had really bizarre outcomes. The fight against Jimmo and Cyril Diabate, both guys had kind of freak injuries out of nowhere, which seems, at least for Jimmo, seems to be like a motif in his recent fights. But Jimmy Manuwa just has never really never really put anyone away convincingly. Looked good against Kyle Kingsbury in his debut. That fight was stopped due to a cut, and Kingsbury started to come back a little bit with the wrestling. I thought the Shogun matchup was going to be a good fight to answer some questions about Manuwa. But in the Gustafsson fight, I thought he competed very well, took a huge step up, was banging it out with him. It was competitive early on, even landed a shot that seemed to wobble Gustafsson. Eventually ate the knee, though, and got finished. Blachowicz ran through Ilir Latifi, who I think was just kind of overhyped and overrated by most fans at that point. But, still looked like the far more polished and skilled kickboxer. Slammed a kick into his body that put him down, and that was it. Looks like he packs big power. I wouldn't be surprised if he has the power advantage here and is the more skilled striker. But I think Manuwa just has has more upside, has that athletic potential. I'm gonna go with Manuwa here. He's actually the older fighter. He's 35, so who knows when that age will start to set in. Blachowicz is 32, I think. But I got to go with Manuwa. But I wouldn't be surprised if he lost either. Then the main event, heavyweight, which I just don't think it has to be one of the most irrelevant fights you can make today. Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Cro Cop. It's really disappointing to me that Cro Cop is back in the UFC at this point in his career. I mean, 3.5 years ago was his last fight in the UFC. Did not look good. For a while there, Cro Cop was kind of this aging veteran that was hanging on, and he was never really getting blown through by guys. I remember the Dos Santos fight. Wasn't really going his way, but hung in there, and I think it got stopped because of an eye injury. But wasn't getting knocked out cold. Won the Pat Barry fight, but then in his fight against Brendan Schaub, which I thought he was doing some stuff well early on, winning maybe a round in there, just ate a punch, and I think in the third round out and just got knocked out cold. And then his fight against Roy Nelson, again, didn't have much success early on, and Nelson was able to overwhelm him, took his back and pounded him out. And that was 3.5 years ago. I didn't even know that he was still competing in MMA after that. I just looked over his record now. Has a couple wins over some Japanese fighters, and a loss to current UFC heavyweight Alexei Olenek. And then had a few kickboxing bouts as well, one which he lost. His chin, I just think, is weaker than Gonzaga's at this point, really. And I think he's just far more shop-worn. Gonzaga, 2-fight losing streak, but lost to really talented guys. Lost to the top contender now, Stipe Miocic, in a fight that Miocic didn't even look great in. And I think Gonzaga had an injury that kind of debilitated him in that fight. In his last fight, lost to Mitrione, who I think is still underrated and has made tremendous strides in his striking. But before those two losses, had a legit knockout over Sean Jordan, who I think a lot of fans still respect as a promising prospect, and also had a knockout over Dave Herman, which may not count for much, but still had an early first round knockout. Had a submission win over Ben Rothwell a couple years ago. So I think Gonzaga still has skills, still been fighting at a higher level, far higher of late than Cro Cop has. So I got to go with Gonzaga. Both guys, both their chins, I think, are kind of susceptible at this point. But I would have to say Cro Cop is definitely older. He's 40. Gonzaga's 35, and I think Cro Cop's more shop worn at this point. Definitely, I think Gonzaga is still, outside the top 10, but still kind of a legitimate, veteran, top 15 or so in the UFC, and Cro Cop is not, and was looking like he was on his way out 3.5 years ago. So got to go with Gonzaga here. I think honestly he ends up catching Cro Cop at some point and knocking him out. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 64, Gonzaga versus Cro Cop 2. I know not the greatest analysis this time, but there's just a lot of fighters I don't know here, and I'm not going to pretend to know that know what I'm talking about with these guys I've never seen before. But I'll be back very soon with my predictions for Machida versus Rockhold, which looks like a very good fight card, a great rebound from this worthless event, and then we have 186 at the end of the month. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.